with the Vikings sitting at a 6-1 record after beating the Cardinals 34-26 in Week 8, are the Vikings a legitimate contender in the NFC?
I mean, I have to agree that they are. I think that the most vulnerable part of their team would have to be their defense, because there are times in which their offense puts them ahead by a lot, and then when the offense goes cold, like some offenses do, the defense isn't necessarily able to keep them in the game. Sometimes they allow some points, sometimes they allow big chunk plays. So again, it looks to be a little inconsistent at times, but again, at the end of the day, a dub is a dub, whether it's by a point or by 50. So kudos to the Vikings. Obviously, their schedule over the last couple of weeks has been favorable for the most part. The winning streak starts against Detroit. That was a nail biter. Then you go in to play the Saints. That was another nail biter. You play Chicago, another nail biter. You play the freaking Dolphins. That one was without Tua. Oh, actually, that was Tua's first game back. And that one was a little bit closer than I would have expected it to be, because the Dolphins ended up clawing back. And then, of course, today's win with Arizona, that was 34-26. So each game has literally been probably within one possession or two at most. And I'm looking at this and I'm saying they have the Commanders next week, who are on their own 3-game win streak. Then after that, they have the Bills, Cowboys, Patriots, and Jets. Each of those teams are competitive, to say the very least. The weakest team on that list probably being the Patriots, only because I'm going off of record. I know they won today, but this is going to be where the Vikings have to prove it. This is where the Vikings are going to have to show that they are the real deal. Similar to the Giants, their schedule has been slightly favorable, but you have to win those games. You have to show that you can beat bad teams, and then when the good teams come to town, or when you go to their house, you got to be able to be competitive. And we'll see what happens over the next month or so, because those are the next 5 games I just laid out for you. But I have to give credit, because the offense is making moves. Dalvin Cook is running the ball. Justin Jefferson is getting targets. They've got an emerging tight end in Irv Smith. Obviously, they have Thielen. Kirk Cousins just literally has to stay away from Sunday night, Monday night, and Thursday night games. So basically what you have to equivalent for is, if the Vikings were to go, they're 17 games in the season, 14-0, you have to include those 3 losses being your primetime games, because they are, like, Kirk Cousins is legitimately absolutely atrocious on all big stages. It's just statistically proven he can't do it. So if the Vikings can just win all the other games, then they might very well be competitive. Now, obviously, the playoffs are going to be primetime no matter what. I mean, there are some 3 o'clock games. Sometimes there are some 6 o'clock games. But nevertheless, since it's the playoffs, it's win or go home. So he can't afford to have an off game there. But in terms of the NFC North, I don't see them losing the grip that they have on this. The Packers just lost tonight. Shocker. That's their 4th loss in a row. But anyway, if they keep this up, if they can run the ball effectively, if Kevin O'Connell can continue to lead this offense with his mind, I believe that he and Kirk Cousins will do just enough to wrap this division on up over the next 6 or 7 weeks. And I firmly believe that the Minnesota Vikings, if they keep this up, can make a run at an NFC Championship berth.
That's a bold take, bro. I'm being 100% honest. You talk about NFC Championship?
I said a run at the NFC Championship, because
I'm just
think of this. The NFC gets 2 buys.
Yep.
If they get a bye, that's a minimum of the divisional. Depending on who they play, whether that's somebody that comes out of the NFC South, do you think they can't beat the Falcons? You think they can't beat a struggling Buccaneers team? That's an NFC Championship berth right there with 1 game.
Yeah, to me, it's whether or not they get one of those buys. And I'm going to tell you right now,
who's gonna compete with them in the NFC outside of the Giants, the Cowboys?
Well, first of all, the Eagles are still undefeated.
Right, that's 1 bye.
The game that I'm circling is in a couple weeks from now. It's going to be that Cowboys and the Vikings. It's the Cowboys game.
And the Vikings.
Because if the Cowboys win that game, that's going to really put the Vikings in a tailspin. Because if they were to get into a situation where both teams respectively have the same record at the end of the year, but the Cowboys have it, and let's just say the Cowboys finish with the second best record, which would be absolutely insane at the end of the season, they would get the bye.
Yeah.
So, wait. Would they not? Because they would get a
there's
wild
7
card.
teams this year.
They would get a wild card spot because the Eagles would own the division. So I retract that. So I thought it was actually based on overall record, but I don't think it's actually the case.
Oh, that's right. Wait a minute. Wait, isn't there only 1 bye now with their 7 teams in the playoffs?
There is one. There is 1 bye.
Right. So Philly's got to hold on to it. So basically, guys, disregard things. Like, see, Kyle and I are tired. It's been a long weekend. You know what I'm saying? We're a little lit. I'm
glad we caught that.
Yeah, that would have been pretty bad.
But okay, to kind of get back on track here, when it comes to the Vikings overall, this is a legitimate team to consider for the rest of the year. Now, do I think that they're the best team in the NFC? No. I think that they're probably top 2, top 3. And I would say it's arguably top 2. Because the way that I see it, I think that the Cowboys could potentially be a better team, even though that the Vikings, I believe, have a better record. So I like where the Vikings are going now. And Kev, like you laid out, they have some favorable matchups, especially against the Commanders this, I guess you would say, week 9. And then after that, they have a little bit of a tough stretch against the Bills and the Cowboys. After that, they got the Patriots and the Jets. I think those are winnable games for them. But I think depending on how those Bills and Cowboys games go, those are going to be very tough matchups for them. If they could be able to split those 2 games, I think that's best case scenario for them. Because after that, I think, they'll have a difficult time playing the Giants at the end of the year. I don't know what's going to happen in the Packers game. We'll see what happens just because it is going to be a divisional game. And granted, that's not going to take place until January. So both these teams could look a lot differently when we get to that part of the season. But I have to say, we did pick the Vikings to be representatives of the NFC North this season. And it has played out that way. Not to give ourselves a pat on the back here. But they've just been a very balanced team so far. And granted, I wouldn't say that they're winning their games in they're not winning these games where they're blowing out the other teams and they're winning by 2 or 3 touchdowns, but they're winning these one possession games when compared to last year, they were losing them. So there were a lot of one possession games that they had the last couple of years where they fell on the L column instead of the W column. This year, they've really been able to not make those crucial mistakes late in games that would put them behind the 8 ball compared to where they were last year. And they've taken advantage of this scenario this year. And they're in a really good position here. It's just when it comes to some of the other teams in the NFC, I got to contend with the Eagles. I got to contend with the Cowboys. I know the Giants just lost to the Seahawks this past weekend, but the Giants, do not sleep on them. The Seahawks are right there behind the Vikings as far as I'm concerned. So there are some decent teams in play here. And I'm not even factoring in teams like the Bucks that can make a turnaround or the 49ers that can make a turnaround. So the Vikings are definitely going to have to contend with some really solid teams here in the NFC. Granted, they have a 6-1 record, and I'm not going to slight them for that. But like you said, Kev, they're going to have some tests in the next couple of weeks once you get past the Commanders game. And if they could be able to win those matchups or at least split them, I think that's best case scenario for them. But overall, they've been a very solid team this year. They've been consistently in our top 5 when it comes to our power rankings this year. So they've been able to maintain that. Got to give them credit for that. But it's like you said, Kev, can they perform in primetime games? Because when they get to the playoffs, that's what it's going to be. And history shows that Kirk Cousins has not been able to do that. So I'm still a little bit iffy with the Vikings. But overall, for this season so far, they've been solid. And I do think that if they can maintain their winning ways, they can be a contender in the NFC. I can't say otherwise right now because they're winning football games. So good on the Vikings. Did a nice job against the Cardinals this past weekend, and we'll see whether or not that they can continue it going into the next couple weeks.